Time has protected remarkable secrets within Mexico's ancient monuments. Towering pyramids, precisely carved temples, concealed chambers, and cryptic inscriptions reveal accomplishments that continue to challenge archaeological interpretation. Every excavation uncovers another fragment of an extraordinary legacy, where evidence often proves more astonishing than imagination. So sit back, relax, and let's explore the captivating archaeological mysteries that continue to intrigue humanity. Deep within the lush forests of western Belize, a narrow opening in limestone leads into a world shaped by darkness, flowing water, and immense stretches of time. Actun Tunichil Muknal, often called the Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre, begins with a river crossing before winding through echoing chambers where shimmering mineral formations catch the faintest light. The silence is interrupted only by dripping water and the careful footsteps of those permitted to enter. Every passage feels untouched by ordinary time, creating the impression that the cave still guards the intentions of the people who ventured inside centuries ago. For the ancient Maya, caves were far more than geological formations. They represented sacred thresholds linking the human world with powerful supernatural realms. These hidden spaces were associated with creation, fertility, rain, and communication with divine forces believed to influence everyday life. Archaeological investigations at Actun Tunichil Muknal have uncovered hundreds of ceramic vessels, stone tools, and ceremonial objects placed with remarkable care. Many were intentionally broken before being left behind, suggesting that their purpose had been fulfilled through ritual rather than practical use. As researchers explored deeper into the cave, they encountered evidence that transformed understanding of its significance. Human remains rested alongside ceremonial offerings, indicating that the cave had served as an important ritual center during the late Classic Maya period, roughly between AD 700 and 900. This era coincided with increasing political instability, prolonged droughts in parts of the Maya world, and growing pressure on agricultural systems. Some scholars believe ceremonies conducted here reflected desperate appeals for rain, prosperity, or divine intervention during uncertain times. Among the discoveries, one figure has become especially famous. Resting within a remote chamber lies the skeleton known as the Crystal Maiden. Tiny mineral deposits accumulated over the bones for centuries, giving them a sparkling appearance when illuminated. Although the popular name suggests a young woman, later examinations have proposed that the remains may actually belong to a young adult whose biological sex has been debated through ongoing analysis. Regardless of that uncertainty, the individual appears to have been placed deliberately as part of an elaborate ceremonial event rather than an ordinary burial. The cave itself reinforces this impression. Reaching the deepest chambers requires climbing slippery rocks, swimming through cold water, and navigating confined passages. Transporting ceramic offerings and human participants into such an environment demanded planning, determination, and considerable physical effort. Every object found inside reflects deliberate choices rather than accidental abandonment. The deeper explorers travel, the stronger the sense that every chamber held symbolic meaning, understood by those who performed these ancient ceremonies. Mainstream archaeology explains Actun Tunichil Muknal as an extraordinary ceremonial landscape shaped by Maya religious beliefs. Ritual specialists likely viewed the cave as a living place where communication with powerful deities became possible. Offerings, bloodletting ceremonies, and, in rare cases, human sacrifice may have formed part of complex religious traditions intended to restore balance between humanity and the unseen forces governing nature. Yet, the cave has inspired interpretations extending beyond conventional scholarship. Some researchers interested in comparative mythology note that sacred caves appear in traditions around the world, often described as places where ordinary reality seems to blur with another realm. Others suggest that the unusual acoustics, perpetual darkness, and isolation could have created deeply altered psychological experiences for participants, making ceremonies feel profoundly transformative. A few independent writers even speculate that certain chambers were believed to preserve gateways to spiritual dimensions, interpreting the difficult journey inward as both a physical and symbolic passage into another state of existence. There are also stories shared by local guides and visitors who describe an unusual atmosphere lingering within the cave. Some speak of overwhelming stillness, unexpected emotional reactions, or the feeling of being quietly observed despite complete solitude. Such experiences cannot be measured through archaeology, and they may simply reflect the powerful environment itself. Even so, they continue to add another layer to the cave's enduring reputation. Scientific evidence answers many important questions about when the cave was used and how ceremonies were conducted. Yet it cannot fully reveal the private thoughts of those who entered carrying torches into absolute darkness. What hopes accompanied their prayers? What fears compelled such demanding rituals? What meaning did they attach to every echo, every shadow, and every drop of water falling from the ancient stone? Actun Tunichil Muknal remains one of the most remarkable ritual sites ever discovered, offering an exceptionally preserved glimpse into Maya spiritual life, while quietly reminding us that some aspects of the human experience resist complete explanation. Every chamber preserves evidence. Every artifact tells part of the story, and somewhere within the silence, unanswered possibilities continue to endure. While Actun Tunichil Muknal draws attention into a subterranean world shaped by ritual and silence, another remarkable site invites us to look upward instead. High within the rugged landscapes of northern Mexico, human ingenuity appears woven into towering cliffs, where stone, earth, and imagination came together to create one of the region's most unusual archaeological landmarks. Nestled within the dramatic canyon known as Cañón de las Ventanas in the modern Mexican state of Chihuahua, Cueva de la Olla rests inside a broad natural rock shelter overlooking a quiet valley. From a distance, the site seems almost inseparable from the surrounding cliffs. The ochre-colored walls blend naturally with the canyon, while the shelter itself provides protection from rain, harsh sunlight, and powerful seasonal winds. Even today, reaching the location requires determination, rewarding visitors with sweeping views of a landscape that appears remarkably unchanged despite the passing of centuries. The feature that gives the site its name immediately captures attention. Rising prominently within the shelter stands an enormous clay structure resembling a giant earthen jar. Nearly 4 meters tall, this carefully constructed vessel dominates the interior of the cave. Its rounded shape, narrow opening, and impressive craftsmanship have fascinated archaeologists since the site first attracted scientific interest. Unlike ordinary household pottery, this immense container was built directly into the settlement itself, becoming part of its architecture rather than a portable object. Mainstream archaeological research identifies this remarkable feature as a granary, designed to preserve maize and other essential food supplies. Elevated above the ground and carefully engineered, the structure would have helped protect valuable harvests from moisture, insects, and rodents. Small ventilation openings appear to have encouraged air circulation, allowing stored crops to remain usable for extended periods. In an environment where rainfall could be unpredictable and growing seasons uncertain, such an innovation represented far more than clever engineering. It reflected careful planning, environmental knowledge, and an understanding of long-term survival. Cueva de la Olla formed part of the broader Paquimé, or Casas Grandes cultural tradition, which flourished between approximately AD 1200 and 1450. Communities associated with this culture developed extensive trade networks connecting regions that stretched hundreds of kilometers. Turquoise, shells from distant coastlines, exotic birds, finely crafted ceramics, and other valuable materials moved through these interconnected settlements, demonstrating that the inhabitants participated in a sophisticated exchange system rather than existing in isolation. Excavations around the cave have revealed residential rooms constructed from adobe, storage areas, hearths, and evidence of daily domestic life. Families prepared food, crafted tools, cared for children, and participated in seasonal routines within this protected shelter. The canyon offered defensive advantages while also providing access to nearby water sources and agricultural land. Every aspect of the settlement appears carefully adapted to its challenging environment. Yet, despite growing archaeological understanding, important questions remain unanswered. Why construct such an enormous storage vessel inside this particular cave? Was its primary function simply practical, or did its impressive scale communicate something more profound to the community gathered around it? Its proportions certainly exceed what many visitors might expect from an ordinary granary. The sheer visual presence of the structure suggests that preserving food carried significance extending beyond simple necessity. Throughout many ancient societies, successful harvests represented stability, continuity, and survival itself. Food storage often became closely connected with ceremony, seasonal celebrations, and collective identity. Some archaeologists have proposed that the vessel symbolized communal cooperation, representing the shared efforts required to ensure the well-being of everyone living within the settlement. Rather than serving individual households, it may have functioned as a central reserve managed collectively during periods of scarcity. Such an arrangement would have strengthened social bonds while reducing the risks posed by drought or failed harvests. Others have wondered whether ceremonies accompanied the filling or opening of the great vessel. Although direct evidence remains limited, many agricultural societies incorporated ritual practices into planting and harvesting cycles. Songs, offerings, symbolic gestures, or seasonal gatherings often reinforced both spiritual beliefs and community relationships. If similar traditions existed here, the immense granary may have occupied both an economic and ceremonial role simultaneously. The architecture surrounding Cueva de la Olla also raises intriguing possibilities. The rooms appear carefully organized within the protective embrace of the rock shelter, creating a settlement that balanced accessibility with security. Natural formations shaped movement through the site, while elevated positions provided wide visibility over the surrounding valley. Every design choice suggests detailed familiarity with the landscape accumulated through generations of experience. Environmental studies indicate that climate fluctuations periodically affected northern Mexico during the occupation of the region. Changes in rainfall patterns could have challenged agricultural production, requiring increasingly sophisticated storage methods. From this perspective, the great vessel becomes evidence of resilience rather than mystery, a practical response developed through observation and adaptation. Yet, practical explanations do not necessarily eliminate deeper symbolic meaning. Large communal structures frequently acquire cultural significance, extending beyond their immediate purpose. A granary capable of sustaining an entire settlement could easily become associated with prosperity, continuity, leadership, or divine favor. Over time, the physical structure itself may have evolved into a symbol recognized by every generation growing up within the canyon walls. Alternative interpretations occasionally emerge outside mainstream archaeology. Some independent writers speculate that the immense vessel functioned as a ceremonial chamber connected with fertility rites or seasonal observances. Others suggest its unusual proportions reflected astronomical symbolism, proposing that its placement aligned with significant solar events or changing seasons. Careful archaeological investigation has not confirmed these ideas, and available evidence continues to support its interpretation as an advanced storage facility. Nevertheless, such theories illustrate how unusual architecture naturally encourages broader reflection. The cave's secluded location has inspired still other possibilities. Oral traditions throughout many cultures describe mountains, cliffs, and caves as places where the physical and spiritual worlds seem unusually close. Although no direct evidence links Cueva de la Olla with supernatural traditions of this kind, its dramatic setting encourages contemplation. Standing within the shelter, surrounded by towering stone walls and endless silence, it becomes easy to understand why generations might have regarded the location with profound respect. Modern conservation efforts seek to preserve the fragile adobe walls and the extraordinary granary for future generations. Exposure to weather, erosion, and increasing tourism presents ongoing challenges. Every crack in the ancient plaster reminds researchers that preserving archaeological sites requires constant care. Once damaged, details capable of answering long-standing questions may disappear forever. Even with decades of archaeological research, Cueva de la Olla continues to resist complete interpretation. Its architecture demonstrates remarkable technical ability, while its setting inspires reflection far beyond engineering alone. Was the great vessel simply an ingenious response to environmental uncertainty, or did it embody ideas that cannot easily be recovered through excavation? Did ceremonies once fill the shelter with voices now carried away by time? Or does the quiet canyon still conceal details waiting patiently within untouched layers of earth, ready to reshape our understanding of the people who transformed a natural cave into one of ancient Mexico's most extraordinary places? From the secluded cliffs of Cueva de la Olla, where a single monumental granary continues to inspire quiet debate, our path now leads farther south into the volcanic highlands of western Mexico. Here, another ancient center rests above shimmering waters, preserving traces of a powerful kingdom whose achievements are often overshadowed by its better-known neighbors. Yet within these weathered stones, many questions remain as compelling today as they were centuries ago. Overlooking the tranquil expanse of Lake Pátzcuaro in the modern state of Michoacán, Tzintzuntzan occupies a commanding ridge where mountains frame the horizon and morning mist drifts slowly across the water. Even before reaching the archaeological zone, the landscape conveys a remarkable sense of purpose. Terraces climb the hillside with measured precision, while broad ceremonial platforms overlook valleys that once supported thriving communities. The silence of the site is broken only by birdsong and the movement of wind through pine and oak forests, creating an atmosphere that feels both peaceful and deeply reflective. At the heart of Tzintzuntzan stand its most recognizable structures, known today as the yacatas. Unlike the square or rectangular pyramids found elsewhere in ancient Mexico, these monuments display an extraordinary architectural design that immediately sets them apart. Each combines a rectangular platform with a rounded rear section, creating a distinctive keyhole-like form, unlike any major ceremonial architecture known from neighboring cultures. Built from carefully fitted volcanic stone resting upon massive foundations, the yacatas once supported temples where important religious ceremonies unfolded. Their elegant curves continue to puzzle architects and archaeologists alike. Constructing such precise forms required considerable planning, technical expertise, and organized labor. Every stone appears intentionally placed, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of engineering as well as symbolic design. Tzintzuntzan served as the ceremonial and political capital of the Purépecha Empire during the late post-classic period, particularly from the 14th century until the arrival of Spanish forces in the early 16th century. At its height, the city governed one of the most powerful states in ancient Mexico. While the neighboring Mexica Empire expanded aggressively through military conquest, the Purépecha successfully defended their territory for generations, creating one of the few regional powers capable of resisting repeated military campaigns. This remarkable achievement has fascinated historians for decades. Archaeological evidence suggests the Purepecha developed highly organized administrative systems, efficient agricultural production, and advanced expertise in metallurgy. Their craftsmen produced exceptional objects from copper, bronze, gold, and silver, demonstrating techniques that surpassed many contemporary societies within Mesoamerica. Long-distance trade connected Tzintzuntzan with distant communities, bringing valuable materials, artistic influences, and economic prosperity into the capital. Despite these accomplishments, the origins of the Purepecha people remain only partially understood. Unlike many neighboring cultures, the Purepecha language has no universally accepted linguistic relationship with other major language families in ancient Mexico. This linguistic isolation has encouraged decades of scholarly investigation. Some specialists suggest that the language developed independently over long periods within western Mexico. Others have explored possible connections with more distant populations, although no consensus has emerged. The available evidence remains incomplete, leaving the earliest development of Purepecha society open to continued research. The architecture of Tzintzuntzan contributes another layer to this enduring mystery. Why were the yacatas designed in such an unusual shape? Mainstream archaeology generally interprets their form as a distinctive regional architectural tradition reflecting Purepecha identity. The combination of curved and rectangular elements may have carried symbolic meaning connected with political authority, sacred space, or cosmological beliefs unique to the kingdom. Unfortunately, many written traditions that might have explained these ideas disappeared during the colonial period, leaving modern researchers to reconstruct meaning primarily through archaeology. The temples that once crowned these platforms have long since disappeared, yet the foundations preserve subtle clues. Excavations have uncovered ceremonial offerings, fragments of sculptures, pottery, and evidence of ritual activity. Fires burned upon these elevated sanctuaries, incense drifted into the mountain air, and priests likely conducted ceremonies visible across the lake below. The location itself seems carefully chosen, allowing the city to dominate both the surrounding landscape and the spiritual imagination of its inhabitants. Lake Pátzcuaro held profound importance within Purepecha belief systems. Water frequently represented transition, renewal, and connections between earthly existence and spiritual realms. Several nearby islands became important ceremonial destinations, suggesting that the relationship between the city and the lake extended far beyond practical concerns such as fishing or transportation. Every sunrise reflecting across the water may have reinforced sacred traditions repeated over countless generations. Some researchers have proposed that the placement of the yacatas reflects careful astronomical planning. Certain alignments appear to correspond with solar events observed during particular times of the year. Seasonal observations would have been valuable for agriculture, ceremonial calendars, and political authority alike. While many archaeologists acknowledge the possibility of intentional astronomical orientation, the precise significance of these alignments remains the subject of continuing investigation. Outside mainstream scholarship, more speculative interpretations occasionally appear. Independent researchers have suggested that the unusual curved architecture encoded forgotten mathematical principles or represented symbolic maps of celestial cycles. Others have imagined that the city's distinctive layout reflected knowledge inherited from an even earlier tradition whose evidence has yet to be discovered. These proposals remain unsupported by archaeological consensus, but they demonstrate how Tzintzuntzan continues to stimulate curiosity far beyond conventional historical study. There are also enduring local traditions describing hidden passageways extending beneath parts of the ceremonial complex. Stories speak of concealed chambers where rulers safeguarded sacred objects, royal regalia, or treasured ceremonial artifacts before foreign conquest transformed the region forever. Archaeologists have found no conclusive evidence confirming extensive underground networks beneath the site, yet isolated cavities and later construction continue to encourage occasional speculation. Whether these accounts preserve distant memories or simply reflect generations of storytelling remains impossible to determine with certainty. The decline of Tzintzuntzan adds another layer of quiet melancholy. Following Spanish colonization, political power shifted, religious buildings were dismantled or repurposed, and many original structures gradually fell into ruin. Stones once forming temples found new life in colonial construction, while countless traditions disappeared through cultural upheaval. Archaeological excavation recovers fragments of that earlier world, but many details remain permanently beyond reach. Modern preservation has revealed remarkable craftsmanship hidden for centuries beneath soil and vegetation. Every restored wall demonstrates extraordinary engineering, while every newly examined artifact adds another small piece to an incomplete historical puzzle. Yet even with advancing technology, researchers continue to encounter unanswered questions regarding the city's earliest development, religious symbolism, political organization, and architectural inspiration. Standing atop the ancient terraces as evening light settles over Lake Pátzcuaro, it becomes clear that Tzintzuntzan offers more than impressive ruins. It preserves the memory of a civilization whose accomplishments continue to emerge only gradually from the archaeological record. The Yakutas remain silent, their curved foundations watching the changing seasons much as they have for centuries. Whether they still conceal deeper meanings, forgotten traditions, or undiscovered evidence waiting beneath the volcanic soil remains an open mystery, one that continues to invite careful exploration with every new generation of researchers. As the quiet terraces of Tzintzuntzan fade into the distance, another ancient landscape invites our attention. Instead of monumental pyramids rising above a lake, this next destination is defined by weathered stone figures scattered across a hillside, their silent expressions fixed upon a horizon they have watched for centuries. Time has softened their edges, yet their presence remains remarkably powerful, hinting at beliefs and traditions that are still only partly understood. Cerro de los Ídolos rises within the modern Mexican state of Jalisco, occupying a prominent hill surrounded by fertile valleys and rugged terrain. At first glance, the landscape appears peaceful. Native vegetation covers much of the hillside, while scattered rocks blend naturally into the environment. Only as visitors approach do unusual shapes begin to emerge from the earth. Massive carved sculptures, partially concealed by grass and soil, stand where ancient artisans placed them many centuries ago. Their faces seem both familiar and unfamiliar, combining recognizable human features with symbolic elements whose meanings remain uncertain. Unlike many archaeological sites defined by imposing architecture, Cerro de los Ídolos draws attention through sculpture. Throughout the hill are numerous stone monuments carved from volcanic rock, ranging from relatively modest figures to imposing statues several meters tall. Some depict seated individuals with elaborate headdresses. Others display stylized animals, geometric forms, or combinations of human and supernatural characteristics. Their craftsmanship reflects remarkable technical skill, especially considering the hardness of the stone from which they were shaped. Archaeologists generally associate the site with the traditions of Western Mexico during the late formative and classic periods, although establishing an exact chronology has proven difficult. Excavations and stylistic analysis suggest that Cerro de los Ídolos developed over several centuries, with different generations contributing additional sculptures and ceremonial spaces. Unlike better documented centers farther east, relatively few written records survive to illuminate the identities of the people who created these remarkable monuments. This absence of historical documentation has transformed the sculptures themselves into the primary witnesses of their own story. Each figure appears intentional. Each posture seems meaningful. Every carefully carved detail suggests symbolism that once communicated ideas clearly understood within its original cultural setting. Today, much of that symbolic language has faded from memory. Researchers have proposed that many of the sculptures represent ancestors, rulers, respected spiritual leaders, or protective beings connected with local religious traditions. Similar practices appear in various ancient societies, where stone monuments reinforced communal identity while preserving connections between the living and the sacred world. The placement of these statues upon elevated ground may have strengthened their ceremonial importance, allowing them to overlook surrounding settlements and agricultural lands. Several sculptures possess unusually expressive faces. Wide eyes, pronounced noses, folded hands, and carefully detailed ornaments distinguish one monument from another. Rather than creating identical figures, the artists appear to have emphasized individuality. This has encouraged speculation that at least some statues portray actual people rather than generalized deities. Whether they honored influential leaders, revered ancestors, or legendary figures remains uncertain. The hill itself also raises intriguing possibilities. Why was this particular location selected? From its summit, wide views extend across the surrounding valleys, making it possible to observe distant movement and changing weather. Elevated places frequently carried ceremonial importance throughout ancient Mexico, serving as natural stages where rituals connected communities with celestial events, surrounding mountains, and seasonal cycles. Cerro de los Ídolos fits comfortably within this broader pattern, although its precise ceremonial role remains difficult to reconstruct. Excavations have uncovered architectural remnants, stone platforms, and evidence of repeated occupation, suggesting that the hill served purposes extending beyond sculpture alone. Ceremonial gatherings likely occurred here over long periods, perhaps involving music, offerings, processions, and seasonal observances linked to agriculture. Every newly uncovered feature adds another fragment to an incomplete picture, yet many essential details remain beyond recovery. One particularly fascinating aspect of the site is the apparent diversity of artistic styles. Certain sculptures display rounded forms and relatively natural proportions, while others embrace highly abstract designs emphasizing symbolic rather than realistic features. Archaeologists interpret these differences as evidence that the site evolved gradually, reflecting changing artistic traditions, political influences, or religious ideas introduced over generations. Yet this artistic diversity has also encouraged more speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers suggest that the differing styles indicate multiple cultural groups sharing the same ceremonial center over extended periods. Others wonder whether the sculptures represent entirely separate belief systems, gradually incorporated into a single sacred landscape. Although archaeological evidence supports long-term occupation, it has not confirmed these broader cultural theories. Even so, the monuments continue to invite reflection precisely because they resist simple classification. The name Cerro de los Ídolos itself contributes to the site's enduring reputation. Early explorers and local observers referred to the statues as idols, assuming they represented objects of worship. Modern archaeology approaches the sculptures with greater caution, recognizing that ancient religious traditions were often far more complex than early descriptions suggested. A carved figure may have represented an ancestor, a symbolic guardian, a historical individual, or an aspect of the natural world rather than a deity in the conventional sense. Without surviving written explanations, certainty remains elusive. There are also persistent local traditions describing the hill as a place where unusual experiences occur. Some visitors speak of an overwhelming stillness that settles over the landscape, while others describe an unusual sense of awareness when standing among the statues at sunrise or sunset. Such impressions are deeply personal and cannot be verified through archaeological investigation. The quiet atmosphere, dramatic scenery, and powerful visual presence of the monuments may naturally evoke emotional responses in those who encounter them. More imaginative theories occasionally venture further. A small number of writers have proposed that the sculptures encode astronomical knowledge through their orientation, suggesting that certain monuments align with seasonal solar events or significant stars. Others imagine the statues functioned as markers within ceremonial processions, guiding participants through sacred rituals whose meanings have long since disappeared. While researchers continue studying spatial relationships throughout the site, no comprehensive archaeological consensus has confirmed these more elaborate interpretations. The weather has also become an unintentional sculptor. Centuries of wind, rain, and temperature changes have gradually softened carved details, leaving some faces almost ghost-like in appearance. Erosion conceals as much as it reveals. Features that once carried unmistakable meaning may now appear ambiguous simply because time has worn away the evidence needed for confident interpretation. Every season subtly reshapes the monuments, reminding us that archaeology often works against the slow but relentless forces of nature. Despite decades of investigation, Cerro de los Ídolos remains less widely known than many famous archaeological centers in Mexico. This relative obscurity has preserved much of its atmosphere. Visitors often encounter the site in near silence, allowing the sculptures to speak through presence rather than spectacle. Without crowds or towering pyramids competing for attention, the carved figures command quiet contemplation. Standing among these ancient monuments, it becomes difficult to escape the feeling that they were created to be seen, remembered, and understood by people whose traditions have largely disappeared. Their expressions remain fixed, their symbolism only partly recovered, and their original purpose continues to invite careful study. Whether future discoveries will fully reveal the intentions of the artists, or whether some meanings disappeared forever with the voices that once explained them, remains one of the enduring mysteries resting upon this remarkable hillside. Leaving behind the silent stone guardians of Cerro de los Ídolos, our journey continues toward a very different landscape. Here, dense vegetation replaces rocky hillsides, winding rivers nourish fertile plains, and broad ceremonial mounds rise gently from the earth instead of dramatic cliffs. At first glance, the setting appears peaceful, almost ordinary. Yet hidden within this quiet environment lies one of ancient Mexico's most intriguing archaeological centers, a place where unusual discoveries continue to reshape long-held assumptions about power, belief, and society. Tamtoc rests in the Huasteca region of present-day San Luis Potosi, surrounded by lush vegetation and nourished by waterways that have sustained human communities for thousands of years. The landscape feels alive. Birds move through the forest canopy, seasonal rains replenish the fertile soil, and the nearby Tampaon River winds steadily through the countryside. Unlike ceremonial cities built upon rugged mountains or volcanic plateaus, Tamtoc flourished within an environment where agriculture, trade, and daily life could prosper together. From above, the archaeological site reveals an impressive arrangement of earthen platforms, plazas, artificial mounds, and carefully organized ceremonial spaces spread across an extensive area. Archaeologists have documented more than 70 structures, although many remain partially concealed beneath vegetation or untouched by excavation. Rather than concentrating every important building within a compact ceremonial district, the settlement appears to have developed organically over many generations, adapting to both the natural terrain and the needs of its inhabitants. The first impression of Tamtoc is not one of overwhelming monumentality, but of quiet sophistication. Its architecture blends gently into the surrounding landscape. Its ceremonial spaces invite reflection rather than spectacle. The deeper researchers investigate the site, the more it becomes apparent that its greatest mysteries emerge not from towering pyramids, but from subtle patterns preserved within the archaeological record. Tamtoc reached its greatest prosperity during the late Classic and early post-Classic periods, although evidence suggests human occupation extended much earlier. It formed part of the wider Huastec cultural tradition, whose communities occupied large portions of northeastern Mexico while maintaining distinctive artistic, linguistic, and religious identities. Long-distance trade connected Tamtoc with neighboring regions, bringing valuable goods, ideas, and cultural influences into the settlement without diminishing its unique character. Excavations have uncovered finely crafted ceramics, shell ornaments, stone sculptures, burial offerings, and evidence of carefully planned construction. These discoveries portray a thriving society supported by agriculture, craftsmanship, and extensive regional interaction. Yet among all the remarkable findings at Tamtoc, none has attracted greater attention than the extraordinary burials uncovered within the ceremonial center. A striking number of high-status graves belong to women. This observation has encouraged years of careful scholarly discussion. In many ancient societies, monumental architecture and elaborate burials often emphasize male political authority. At Tamtoc, however, archaeological evidence presents a more complex picture. Several richly furnished female burials contain valuable offerings, ceremonial objects, and indications of exceptional social standing. Rather than appearing as isolated exceptions, these discoveries suggest that women may have occupied influential positions within the religious, political, or ceremonial life of the community. Mainstream archaeology approaches this evidence cautiously. Researchers recognize that burial wealth does not automatically reveal every aspect of social organization. Nevertheless, the repeated appearance of prominent female individuals has prompted serious consideration of whether Tamtoc developed a social structure unlike many neighboring cultures. Could women have served as powerful ritual specialists? Did hereditary leadership sometimes pass through female family lines? Or did the community recognize forms of authority that modern interpretations have only begun to understand? The archaeological evidence continues to encourage these discussions, even while many definitive answers remain beyond reach. Another remarkable discovery further deepens the site's enduring mystery. Near Tamtoc stands an enormous carved stone slab known for its intricate engravings. The monument contains numerous circular depressions and carefully arranged designs that immediately distinguish it from surrounding sculptures. Since its excavation, archaeologists have debated its original purpose. One widely accepted interpretation proposes that the carved surface functioned as a sophisticated calendrical or astronomical instrument. Certain patterns appear consistent with observations of celestial cycles, seasonal changes, or ritual calendars important to agricultural planning. Ancient societies throughout Mesoamerica carefully monitored the movement of the sun, moon, and stars, recognizing their importance for planting, ceremonies, and political legitimacy. If this interpretation proves correct, the monument represents another example of remarkable scientific knowledge expressed through stone. Yet complete agreement has remained elusive. Some specialists argue that the carvings instead held symbolic or ceremonial significance unrelated to direct astronomical measurement. Others suggest that multiple functions may have existed simultaneously, allowing the monument to serve both ritual and observational purposes depending upon the occasion. Its precise meaning continues to invite careful investigation. The surrounding landscape contributes another layer to the mystery. Seasonal flooding periodically transformed the plains around Tamtoc, renewing agricultural fertility while also reshaping the environment. Archaeologists believe the inhabitants carefully adapted to these changing conditions through elevated construction and sophisticated settlement planning. Such adaptation required detailed environmental knowledge accumulated through generations of observation. Water itself may have held profound spiritual importance. Numerous ancient cultures viewed rivers, springs, and wetlands as places where natural and supernatural realms intersected. Ceremonial activities conducted near these waterways may have reflected beliefs connecting fertility, renewal, and the cycles of life. Although archaeological evidence supports the importance of ritual practice at Tamtoc, many specific traditions remain impossible to reconstruct with certainty. Outside mainstream scholarship, more speculative interpretations occasionally appear. Some independent researchers suggest that the carved monument preserves mathematical principles far more advanced than traditionally recognized. Others have proposed that its engraved patterns represent an encoded map of celestial movements extending over unusually long periods. These ideas remain unconfirmed by archaeological consensus, but they reflect the continuing fascination inspired by the monument's complexity. There are also local traditions describing certain areas of Tamtoc as places possessing an unusual atmosphere, particularly during the early hours of morning when mist settles across the fields. Visitors sometimes describe an unexpected stillness or a feeling that the landscape itself retains echoes of ancient ceremonies. Such impressions are entirely subjective and cannot be measured scientifically. Nevertheless, environments carrying centuries of human memory often inspire powerful emotional responses, especially when surrounded by monuments whose original meanings remain uncertain. Excavation at Tamtoc is far from complete. Large portions of the settlement remain hidden beneath vegetation and accumulated soil. Every archaeological season reveals new structures, additional artifacts, and fresh evidence capable of refining earlier interpretations. Modern technologies, including ground-penetrating surveys and detailed environmental analysis, continue uncovering subtle features invisible to earlier generations of researchers. This gradual process serves as a reminder that archaeology rarely delivers complete answers all at once. Instead, understanding grows patiently, layer by layer, as fragments of evidence slowly assemble into broader historical narratives. Standing among the quiet plazas of Tamtoc today, surrounded by green fields and gently rising ceremonial mounds, it becomes clear that much of the site's importance has yet to be fully understood. Its remarkable female burials, enigmatic carved monument, carefully planned landscape, and enduring cultural legacy continue to challenge conventional assumptions about ancient societies in Mexico. Perhaps future discoveries will reveal the complete story of the people who flourished here. Or perhaps Tamtoc will always preserve part of its identity within the silence of its earthworks, waiting for evidence still concealed beneath the fertile ground to speak at last. From the fertile river plains of Tamtoc, where subtle clues continue to reshape our understanding of ancient society, our journey now turns toward a far harsher environment. The dense vegetation gradually gives way to open horizons, rocky hills, and an arid landscape where survival demanded extraordinary resilience. Rising above this rugged terrain is a hill unlike any other in northern Mexico, its slopes wrapped in thousands of carefully placed stone walls that continue to puzzle archaeologists and historians alike. Cerro de Trincheras stands in the modern Mexican state of Sonora, overlooking a broad desert plain where volcanic hills interrupt an otherwise expansive horizon. Even from a considerable distance, the hill appears unusual. Its slopes are covered by hundreds of terraces built from stacked volcanic stones, tracing graceful horizontal lines around the mountain. Under the changing light of sunrise and sunset, these walls seem to merge naturally with the rocky landscape, giving the impression that the hill itself has been carefully sculpted by human hands. The first explorers who documented the site believed these terraces resembled defensive fortifications, inspiring the name Cerro de Trincheras, or Hill of Trenches. Yet, as archaeological research progressed, that straightforward interpretation became increasingly difficult to support. Although some walls may indeed have offered protection or controlled movement across the hillside, many appear too narrow, too carefully arranged, or too extensive to function as ordinary military defenses. Instead of answering one question, the terraces introduced many more. Why were so many walls constructed upon a single volcanic hill? Why invest enormous amounts of labor into reshaping an entire mountainside? And why does the layout appear to combine practical engineering with patterns that seem almost ceremonial? Today, more than 900 stone terraces have been documented across Cerro de Trincheras. Built without mortar, each wall relies upon the careful placement of volcanic rocks gathered from the surrounding landscape. Collectively, these constructions transformed the natural hill into a complex sequence of platforms, pathways, and enclosed spaces extending from its base to the summit. Archaeologists associate the site with the Trincheras tradition, a regional cultural development that flourished between approximately AD 1300 and 1450, although earlier occupation may also have occurred. The communities living here maintained connections with neighboring societies throughout northern Mexico and the American Southwest, participating in exchange networks that carried shells, pottery, stone tools, pigments, and other valuable materials across considerable distances. Excavations have revealed evidence of residential structures, craft production, ceremonial activity, and long-term occupation. Rather than serving as an isolated fortress, Cerro de Trincheras appears to have supported a vibrant community whose daily life unfolded across its carefully engineered terraces. One of the site's most remarkable locations lies near the summit. Known as the Plaza del Caracol, or Plaza of the Spiral, this unusual ceremonial space immediately attracts attention through its distinctive design. A gently curving stone wall forms a spiral-like enclosure, unlike most architectural features found elsewhere in northern Mexico. Visitors entering the plaza follow a winding path that gradually narrows before reaching the center, creating a carefully controlled experience of movement and perspective. Mainstream archaeology generally interprets the Plaza del Caracol as an important ceremonial area rather than an ordinary gathering place. The spiral arrangement may have held symbolic meaning connected with ritual processions, seasonal ceremonies, or cosmological beliefs shared by the community. Similar spiral imagery appears in many ancient cultures, often associated with cycles of nature, transformation, water, or the passage of time. Exactly what the spiral represented here remains uncertain. Its form encourages contemplation precisely because it avoids obvious explanation. Nearby lies another fascinating feature known as El Mirador, a high observation platform offering commanding views across the surrounding valleys. From this elevated position, changing seasons, approaching weather, and distant movement become readily visible. Such locations would have provided obvious practical advantages, yet they may also have held ceremonial significance. Elevated viewpoints frequently served as places where observations of the heavens blended naturally with ritual activity. Astronomical interpretation has become one of the most frequently discussed aspects of Cerro de Trincheras. Several researchers have noted that certain architectural alignments appear consistent with solar events marking seasonal transitions. The changing position of sunrise and sunset throughout the year may have guided agricultural planning while reinforcing ceremonial calendars essential to community life. Ancient societies across Mesoamerica carefully observed celestial movements, recognizing them as reliable indicators of environmental change. Whether every terrace participated in such observations remains unknown. Some archaeologists argue that only specific ceremonial spaces carried astronomical importance, while the remaining terraces fulfilled practical residential or agricultural functions. Others suggest that the entire hillside may have operated as a carefully organized sacred landscape where daily life, environmental adaptation, and spiritual belief became inseparable. The environment itself helps explain part of this remarkable achievement. Northern Sonora experiences dramatic variations in rainfall, with long dry periods interrupted by seasonal storms capable of rapidly transforming the landscape. Terraces may have reduced erosion, stabilized slopes, directed water flow, and created usable areas for construction. Practical engineering undoubtedly played an important role in shaping the hill. Yet practical necessity alone may not explain the scale of the undertaking. Constructing hundreds of terraces required extraordinary coordination across generations. Such sustained effort suggests a community motivated by purposes extending beyond immediate survival. Social organization, shared beliefs, and collective identity almost certainly influenced the decision to reshape an entire mountain with stone. Outside mainstream archaeology, Cerro de Trincheras has inspired numerous speculative interpretations. Some independent writers propose that the terraces formed an immense symbolic diagram, visible only from elevated perspectives, expressing cosmological ideas now lost to history. Others imagine that the spiral plaza encoded mathematical or astronomical knowledge transmitted through ceremonial architecture rather than written records. A few even suggest that the hill served as a pilgrimage destination, where travelers gathered during significant seasonal events. None of these proposals has received broad archaeological acceptance. Even so, they reflect the remarkable ability of the site to stimulate imagination while resisting simple explanation. Local traditions have added another layer to the mystery over generations. Stories occasionally describe unusual lights appearing upon the hill during certain evenings, or speak of an atmosphere that changes noticeably after sunset. Such accounts remain part of regional folklore rather than scientific evidence, yet they illustrate the lasting impression Cerro de Trincheras continues to leave upon those who encounter it. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies not within any single structure, but within the remarkable vision required to create the entire landscape. Every terrace follows the contours of the volcanic hill with striking consistency. Every pathway appears intentional. Every ceremonial space occupies a position suggesting careful planning rather than accidental development. Modern technologies, including aerial photography, satellite imaging, and detailed topographic surveys, continue revealing relationships between structures that earlier investigators could scarcely observe. Each new study refines understanding while simultaneously introducing fresh questions. Archaeology has explained much about the site's construction techniques and cultural context, yet many aspects of its symbolic meaning remain beyond confident interpretation. Standing near the summit as the desert wind moves quietly through the stones, it becomes easy to appreciate why Cerro de Trincheras continues to fascinate researchers. The terraces seem to embrace the mountain rather than conquer it, transforming natural geology into an enduring expression of human intention. Whether future discoveries ultimately confirm purely practical explanations, reveal forgotten ceremonial traditions, or uncover entirely new dimensions of its purpose, the hillside continues to guard many of its oldest secrets, waiting patiently beneath layers of stone for the next generation of explorers to look a little closer. From the carefully terraced slopes of Cerro de Trincheras, where stone walls transformed an entire mountainside into a place of ceremony and community, our journey returns to the cool volcanic highlands of western Mexico. Here, overlooking the calm waters of Lake Pátzcuaro, another ancient settlement quietly preserves the memory of a powerful civilization. Unlike cities remembered through written chronicles, this place speaks almost entirely through architecture, carefully carved stone, and the silence that lingers among its temples. It is known as Ihuatzio, and despite decades of archaeological study, much of its story remains unfinished. Nestled upon gently rising ground along the southern shore of Lake Pátzcuaro in the modern state of Michoacán, Ihuatzio occupies a landscape where fertile valleys meet forested hills and distant volcanic peaks dominate the horizon. Morning mist often drifts across the lake, softening the outlines of the surrounding mountains before sunlight gradually reveals the ancient platforms resting quietly above the shoreline. Even today, the setting conveys a profound sense of balance between the natural world and the people who once shaped it. At first glance, the site appears modest compared with some of Mexico's better-known ceremonial centers. Broad plazas stretch between low stone platforms, while weathered foundations trace the outlines of buildings that disappeared centuries ago. Yet beneath this apparent simplicity lies one of the most significant settlements associated with the Purepecha civilization, a society whose political strength and technological achievements once rivaled the greatest powers of ancient Mesoamerica. Long before Tzintzuntzan emerged as the imperial capital, Ihuatzio served as an important political and ceremonial center. Archaeological evidence suggests the settlement flourished during the late post-classic period, becoming one of the principal communities from which the Purepecha state expanded its influence throughout western Mexico. Although written records survive only in limited form, excavations continue revealing a sophisticated society supported by organized administration, agriculture, metallurgy, and extensive trade networks. Among the site's most distinctive features are its ceremonial pyramids, broad plazas, and the characteristic yacatas that define Purepecha architecture. These unusual structures combine rectangular platforms with rounded rear sections, creating elegant forms unlike the stepped pyramids constructed elsewhere in ancient Mexico. Their design remains one of the defining mysteries of Purepecha engineering. Why did Purepecha architects consistently favor this remarkable shape? Mainstream archaeology suggests the yacatas reflected a regional architectural tradition deeply connected with religious practice and political identity. The combination of geometric precision and curved forms may have expressed cosmological ideas unique to the Purepecha worldview. Unfortunately, because so much traditional knowledge disappeared during the colonial era, modern researchers must reconstruct these meanings through architecture, archaeology, and scattered historical accounts. Standing before the surviving foundations, it becomes clear that every stone was placed with deliberate care. Massive retaining walls support elevated ceremonial platforms overlooking the surrounding landscape. Carefully fitted volcanic blocks demonstrate remarkable craftsmanship without relying upon mortar. Wide stairways once guided participants toward temples where ceremonies unfolded before assembled communities. Even in their weathered condition, the structures communicate stability, permanence, and quiet authority. Excavations have uncovered pottery, stone tools, ornamental objects, copper artifacts, and ceremonial offerings throughout the site. These discoveries reveal a prosperous community participating in both local production and long-distance exchange. The Purepecha became especially renowned for their advanced knowledge of metallurgy, producing sophisticated objects from copper and bronze at a time when many neighboring societies relied primarily upon stone technologies. This technological expertise has itself become a subject of continuing scholarly interest. Some historians believe Western Mexico developed metallurgy independently through gradual experimentation, while others suggest maritime trade along the Pacific coast introduced new techniques from regions farther south. Archaeological evidence demonstrates complex interaction across large geographic areas, yet the precise pathways through which specialized knowledge spread remain incompletely understood. The relationship between Ihuatzio and nearby Lake Pátzcuaro adds another layer to the site's enduring fascination. The lake occupied a central place within Purepecha spiritual life. Islands scattered across its waters became important ceremonial destinations, while surrounding mountains framed a landscape rich in symbolic meaning. Water often represented transition, renewal, and communication between visible and invisible realms throughout ancient Mesoamerican belief systems. At Ihuatzio, ceremonial architecture appears carefully positioned to maintain visual connections with both the lake and the surrounding highlands, suggesting that geography itself formed part of religious experience. Researchers have also noted possible astronomical considerations within the site's layout. Several structures appear oriented in ways that may correspond with significant solar events occurring during the agricultural calendar. Seasonal observations would have helped determine planting cycles while reinforcing ceremonial festivals marking the passage of time. Although many ancient societies incorporated astronomical knowledge into architecture, The precise intentions behind Ihuatzio's alignments remain open to interpretation. Some archaeologists view these orientations primarily as practical calendar markers. Others argue they carry deeper symbolic significance, linking earthly ceremonies with the orderly movement of the heavens. Both possibilities may have existed simultaneously. One particularly intriguing aspect of Ihuatzio concerns the monumental sculptures discovered throughout the site. Carved stone figures portraying felines, serpents, and human forms once decorated important ceremonial spaces. These powerful images likely represented protective beings, sacred symbols, or expressions of political authority. Yet, without surviving explanations from the people who created them, many interpretations remain necessarily cautious. The image of the coyote appears especially significant within Purépecha tradition. Historical sources describe the coyote as an animal associated with intelligence, adaptability, and leadership. Stone representations found at Ihuatzio may therefore have carried meanings extending far beyond simple artistic decoration. Whether they symbolized ruling dynasties, spiritual guardians, or mythological narratives remains uncertain. Outside mainstream archaeological research, more speculative ideas occasionally emerge. Some independent writers propose that Ihuatzio preserves evidence of ceremonial knowledge inherited from an earlier culture whose influence extended throughout western Mexico. Others suggest that the site's unusual architectural forms encoded symbolic concepts now entirely forgotten. A handful of researchers have even explored possible mathematical relationships governing the placement of ceremonial structures, proposing that proportions observed within the complex reflected sophisticated planning methods not yet fully recognized. At present, archaeological evidence neither confirms nor completely excludes many of these possibilities. Instead, each new excavation encourages careful reassessment while reminding researchers how much remains unknown. Local traditions contribute their own quiet dimension to the mystery. Residents of nearby communities sometimes describe the archaeological zone as possessing an atmosphere unlike ordinary landscapes. Early morning fog drifting through the plazas, shifting light upon the volcanic stone, and the stillness surrounding the ancient foundations combine to create an experience many visitors find unexpectedly moving. Some speak of an unusual sense of presence, as though the site continues to preserve echoes of ceremonies performed long ago. Such impressions remain deeply personal rather than scientific observations, yet they illustrate the enduring emotional power ancient places can exert. Modern archaeological investigations continue revealing details concealed beneath centuries of accumulated soil. Every newly uncovered wall, fragment of pottery, or ceremonial offering refines understanding while introducing additional questions. Ground surveys suggest that portions of the settlement remain unexplored, leaving open the possibility that significant discoveries still await beneath the surface. Whether every alignment was intentional remains uncertain. Some archaeologists argue that the irregular mountain terrain naturally influenced construction choices, producing alignments that appear meaningful without necessarily reflecting deliberate astronomical design. Others believe at least some structures were carefully positioned to mark important seasonal events visible along the surrounding ridges. The available evidence supports continued investigation, but definitive conclusions remain elusive. Another enduring mystery involves the cultural identity of the people who built Tancama. The Sierra Gorda has long served as a meeting place between different cultural traditions. Archaeological remains display influences associated with central Mexico, the Huasteca, and northern regions, creating a remarkably diverse material record. Pottery styles, architectural techniques, and artistic motifs suggest that Tancama participated in a dynamic network of cultural interaction rather than belonging exclusively to a single isolated tradition. This diversity complicates historical interpretation. Instead of presenting a straightforward cultural narrative, Tancama reflects centuries of adaptation, exchange, and transformation. Communities may have changed over time while preserving older traditions, gradually creating the unique archaeological landscape visible today. The surrounding environment adds another dimension to the mystery. The Sierra Gorda contains numerous caves, springs, rivers, and dramatic rock formations that likely held ceremonial significance. Throughout ancient Mexico, natural features frequently became places where rituals connected communities with powerful forces associated with fertility, rainfall, and renewal. Although direct evidence linking every nearby feature with specific ceremonies remains limited, the broader cultural context strongly suggests that nature itself formed an essential part of spiritual life. Outside mainstream archaeology, more speculative ideas have naturally emerged. Some independent researchers propose that Tancama served as a ceremonial gateway between several neighboring cultural regions, where knowledge, religious traditions, and astronomical observations were intentionally exchanged. Others suggest that the site's mountain setting was selected because of perceived energetic qualities associated with the surrounding landscape. Such interpretations remain outside established archaeological consensus, yet they illustrate how unusual environments often inspire broader reflection about the intentions of ancient builders. Local traditions contribute additional layers to the site's quiet reputation. Residents occasionally describe the forests surrounding Tancama as places of unusual stillness, especially during the early hours when mist settles between the hills. Visitors sometimes remark upon the sensation that sound behaves differently within the enclosed valleys, where echoes linger unexpectedly and distant voices seem to travel farther than anticipated. These experiences have simple acoustic explanations shaped by topography and weather, yet they continue to reinforce the impression that the landscape possesses a distinctive atmosphere. Modern archaeological investigations have only begun to reveal the site's full extent. Dense vegetation conceals portions of the settlement, while new survey techniques continue identifying previously unrecognized structures beneath accumulated soil and forest growth. Every excavation season expands the known boundaries of Tancama, suggesting that much of the ancient community remains hidden. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies in how much has yet to be discovered. Unlike sites extensively explored over many decades, Tancama still offers researchers the possibility of genuinely transformative discoveries. Buried architecture, ceremonial offerings, residential districts, and inscriptions, if any survive, may still rest beneath the forest floor, waiting to reshape current understanding of the Sierra Gorda and its ancient inhabitants. Standing among the weathered platforms as clouds drift slowly across the surrounding mountains, it becomes evident that Tancama resists easy interpretation. Its architecture reflects careful adaptation rather than monumental display. Its cultural identity reveals complexity rather than simplicity. Its relationship with the landscape suggests meanings extending beyond practical settlement alone. Whether future excavations uncover decisive answers or simply reveal new mysteries, Tancama continues to preserve an atmosphere of quiet uncertainty, reminding us that some of the most compelling chapters of the ancient world remain patiently concealed beneath stone, soil, and forest, awaiting those willing to look a little deeper. Whether every alignment was intentional remains uncertain. Some archaeologists argue that the irregular mountain terrain naturally influenced construction choices, producing alignments that appear meaningful without necessarily reflecting deliberate astronomical design. Others believe at least some structures were carefully positioned to mark important seasonal events visible along the surrounding ridges. The available evidence supports continued investigation, but definitive conclusions remain elusive. Another enduring mystery involves the cultural identity of the people who built Tancama. The Sierra Gorda has long served as a meeting place between different cultural traditions. Archaeological remains display influences associated with central Mexico, the Huasteca, and northern regions, creating a remarkably diverse material record. Pottery styles, architectural techniques, and artistic motifs suggest that Tancama participated in a dynamic network of cultural interaction rather than belonging exclusively to a single isolated tradition. This diversity complicates historical interpretation. Instead of presenting a straightforward cultural narrative, Tancama reflects centuries of adaptation, exchange, and transformation. Communities may have changed over time while preserving older traditions, gradually creating the unique archaeological landscape visible today. The surrounding environment adds another dimension to the mystery. The Sierra Gorda contains numerous caves, springs, rivers, and dramatic rock formations that likely held ceremonial significance. Throughout ancient Mexico, natural features frequently became places where rituals connected communities with powerful forces associated with fertility, rainfall, and renewal. Although direct evidence linking every nearby feature with specific ceremonies remains limited, the broader cultural context strongly suggests that nature itself formed an essential part of spiritual life. Outside mainstream archaeology, more speculative ideas have naturally emerged. Some independent researchers propose that Tancama served as a ceremonial gateway between several neighboring cultural regions, where knowledge, religious traditions, and astronomical observations were intentionally exchanged. Others suggest that the site's mountain setting was selected because of perceived energetic qualities associated with the surrounding landscape. Such interpretations remain outside established archaeological consensus, yet they illustrate how unusual environments often inspire broader reflection about the intentions of ancient builders. Local traditions contribute additional layers to the site's quiet reputation. Residents occasionally describe the forests surrounding Tancama as places of unusual stillness, especially during the early hours when mist settles between the hills. Visitors sometimes remark upon the sensation that sound behaves differently within the enclosed valleys, where echoes linger unexpectedly and distant voices seem to travel farther than anticipated. These experiences have simple acoustic explanations shaped by topography and weather, yet they continue to reinforce the impression that the landscape possesses a distinctive atmosphere. Modern archaeological investigations have only begun to reveal the site's full extent. Dense vegetation conceals portions of the settlement, while new survey techniques continue identifying previously unrecognized structures beneath accumulated soil and forest growth. Every excavation season expands the known boundaries of Tancama, suggesting that much of the ancient community remains hidden. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies in how much has yet to be discovered. Unlike sites extensively explored over many decades, Tancama still offers researchers the possibility of genuinely transformative discoveries. Buried architecture, ceremonial offerings, residential districts, and inscriptions, if any survive, may still rest beneath the forest floor, waiting to reshape current understanding of the Sierra Gorda and its ancient inhabitants. Standing among the weathered platforms as clouds drift slowly across the surrounding mountains, it becomes evident that Tancama resists easy interpretation. Its architecture reflects careful adaptation rather than monumental display. Its cultural identity reveals complexity rather than simplicity. Its relationship with the landscape suggests meanings extending beyond practical settlement alone. Whether future excavations uncover decisive answers or simply reveal new mysteries, Tancama continues to preserve an atmosphere of quiet uncertainty, reminding us that some of the most compelling chapters of the ancient world remain patiently concealed beneath stone, soil, and forest, awaiting those willing to look a little deeper. Leaving behind the forested ridges of Tancama, our path descends toward the Gulf Coast of Mexico, where the landscape changes once again. Mountains gradually give way to warm coastal plains. Humid air carries the scent of the sea, and steep cliffs rise unexpectedly above the shoreline. Here, where land, sky, and ocean meet, an ancient settlement overlooks the horizon from an extraordinary vantage point. Its stone terraces cling to the mountainside as though suspended between two worlds, preserving a story shaped by trade, ceremony, and one of the most pivotal moments in the history of the Americas. Quiahuiztlán stands on the eastern slopes of the Sierra Madre Oriental in the modern state of Veracruz, gazing across the Gulf of Mexico from a commanding natural terrace. Even before reaching the archaeological site, the scenery leaves a lasting impression. Rugged limestone cliffs descend toward fertile lowlands, while distant waves shimmer beneath changing sunlight. The constant movement of wind across the mountains creates an atmosphere that feels both open and secluded, as though the settlement occupies a place deliberately chosen to observe everything unfolding below. The name Quiahuiztlán is often translated as place of the rain, an appropriate description for a region where seasonal storms have shaped both the landscape and the lives of its inhabitants for centuries. Rain nourished agriculture, filled rivers, and sustained nearby communities, yet it also carried profound spiritual significance throughout ancient Mesoamerica. Water represented renewal, fertility, and the continuing rhythm of existence. Building an important ceremonial center in such an environment was almost certainly more than a practical decision. The architecture of Quiahuiztlán immediately distinguishes it from many other archaeological sites. Instead of broad ceremonial plazas spread across flat terrain, the settlement occupies narrow terraces carved directly into the mountainside. Stone stairways connect elevated platforms, while retaining walls stabilize the steep slopes with remarkable precision. Every structure appears carefully positioned to accommodate the challenging topography, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of both engineering and the natural environment. Among the site's most remarkable features is its extensive ceremonial cemetery. Dozens of carefully constructed stone tombs occupy prominent positions overlooking the surrounding valleys. Unlike ordinary burials, many of these tombs resemble miniature temples, complete with stepped facades and carefully fitted masonry. Their architectural elegance suggests that those interred here held considerable social or religious importance. Archaeologists generally associate Quiahuiztlán with the Totonac civilization, whose communities occupied large portions of the Gulf Coast long before European arrival. During the late post-classic period, the settlement served as both a ceremonial center and an important regional administrative site connected with nearby communities through trade and political alliances. The Totonac people developed sophisticated agricultural systems, distinctive artistic traditions, and thriving commercial networks linking coastal settlements with inland regions. Excavations have uncovered pottery, obsidian tools, shell ornaments, ceremonial objects, and evidence of carefully planned urban development. Together, these discoveries portray a prosperous community capable of organizing large-scale construction while maintaining connections extending far beyond the surrounding mountains. Yet the cemetery remains the aspect of Quiahuiztlán that continues to inspire the greatest curiosity. Why were these tombs designed to resemble temples? Mainstream archaeology suggests that such architecture reflected the elevated status of the individuals buried within them. Monumental tombs may have honored rulers, priests, or influential members of society whose continued presence remained symbolically important even after death. Similar traditions appear throughout ancient civilizations, where funerary architecture reinforced social memory and ancestral authority. Another possibility considers the relationship between the living and the dead. Many ancient Mesoamerican belief systems viewed death not as an ending, but as a transformation within an ongoing cosmic cycle. Tombs constructed with such care may therefore have functioned not merely as burial places, but as enduring ceremonial spaces where descendants continued honoring their ancestors through offerings and ritual observances. The surrounding landscape strengthens this impression. Standing among the stone tombs, visitors can see expansive views stretching toward the Gulf of Mexico. The horizon seems almost limitless, while clouds drift across the mountains in constantly changing formations. Such dramatic scenery may have carried symbolic meaning connected with journeys, transformation, or communication between earthly and spiritual realms. Quiahuiztlán also occupies a unique position within recorded history. In the early 16th century, the settlement became one of the locations where local leaders established contact with the Spanish expedition led by Hernán Cortés. Historical accounts describe political negotiations taking place here as regional communities sought opportunities to alter existing power relationships. These events eventually contributed to profound changes that reshaped the cultural landscape of Mesoamerica. Yet archaeology reminds us that Quiahuiztlán possessed centuries of history long before those encounters occurred. Its significance cannot be reduced to a single historical moment. The site preserves evidence of generations who built temples, honored their ancestors, cultivated surrounding fields, and developed traditions that flourished independently for centuries. Researchers have also examined the orientation of several ceremonial structures. Some buildings appear aligned with prominent mountain peaks or significant solar events occurring during the agricultural calendar. Such alignments would have helped coordinate seasonal ceremonies while reinforcing cosmological beliefs shared throughout the community. Whether every orientation reflects intentional astronomical planning remains uncertain, but the possibility continues attracting scholarly attention. The cemetery itself has generated additional debate. Certain tombs display architectural similarities despite differences in size and placement, suggesting that construction followed carefully established ceremonial principles. Others appear distinct enough to indicate evolving traditions over time. Archaeologists continue studying these variations in hopes of reconstructing social organization, family relationships, and patterns of ritual activity preserved within the burial complex. Outside mainstream scholarship, more speculative interpretations occasionally emerge. Some writers have proposed that the elevated cemetery symbolized a sacred threshold between the human world and the heavens, with its temple-like tombs representing stages of a spiritual journey rather than simple memorials. Others suggest that the dramatic position overlooking the gulf carried astronomical significance extending beyond currently recognized alignments. A few even imagine that certain structures encoded ceremonial knowledge transmitted through architectural symbolism instead of written language. These ideas remain unconfirmed by archaeological evidence. Nevertheless, they reflect the extraordinary impression created by a settlement where architecture, landscape, and memory appear inseparably connected. Local traditions have preserved their own quiet sense of mystery surrounding the site. Guides occasionally describe mornings when thick coastal fog surrounds the terraces, leaving only the upper portions of the ancient walls visible above shifting clouds. During such moments, the cemetery seems suspended between earth and sky, its stone monuments emerging gradually as sunlight disperses the mist. Visitors often describe these experiences as deeply moving, not because they suggest anything supernatural, but because they reveal how profoundly the natural environment continues shaping perception of the ancient city. Modern archaeological work has clarified many aspects of Quiahuiztlán, while simultaneously revealing how much remains unknown. Portions of the surrounding settlement remain only partially excavated, and subtle architectural relationships continue emerging through detailed mapping and conservation. Every restored terrace, every documented tomb, and every recovered artifact contributes another fragment to an incomplete historical narrative. Standing among the silent stone tombs with the gulf stretching endlessly toward the horizon, it becomes difficult to separate history from reflection. The builders of Quiahuiztlán created more than a ceremonial center. They shaped a landscape where memory, architecture, and nature became permanently intertwined. Whether future discoveries will fully explain the symbolism of its remarkable cemetery, the intentions behind its carefully planned terraces, or the deeper beliefs that inspired its builders remains uncertain. For now, the cliffs continue watching over the sea just as they have for centuries, quietly preserving secrets that may still lie hidden beneath the stones, waiting for another chapter of their story to be uncovered. The surrounding landscape strengthens this impression. Standing among the stone tombs, visitors can see expansive views stretching toward the Gulf of Mexico. The horizon seems almost limitless, while clouds drift across the mountains in constantly changing formations. Such dramatic scenery may have carried symbolic meaning connected with journeys, transformation, or communication between earthly and spiritual realms. Quiahuiztlán also occupies a unique position within recorded history. In the early 16th century, the settlement became one of the locations where local leaders established contact with the Spanish expedition led by Hernán Cortés. Historical accounts describe political negotiations taking place here as regional communities sought opportunities to alter existing power relationships. These events eventually contributed to profound changes that reshaped the cultural landscape of Mesoamerica. Yet archaeology reminds us that Quiahuiztlán possessed centuries of history long before those encounters occurred. Its significance cannot be reduced to a single historical moment. The site preserves evidence of generations who built temples, honored their ancestors, cultivated surrounding fields, and developed traditions that flourished independently for centuries. Researchers have also examined the orientation of several ceremonial structures. Some buildings appear aligned with prominent mountain peaks or significant solar events occurring during the agricultural calendar. Such alignments would have helped coordinate seasonal ceremonies while reinforcing cosmological beliefs shared throughout the community. Whether every orientation reflects intentional astronomical planning remains uncertain, but the possibility continues attracting scholarly attention. The cemetery itself has generated additional debate. Certain tombs display architectural similarities despite differences in size and placement, suggesting that construction followed carefully established ceremonial principles. Others appear distinct enough to indicate evolving traditions over time. Archaeologists continue studying these variations in hopes of reconstructing social organization, family relationships, and patterns of ritual activity preserved within the burial complex. Outside mainstream scholarship, more speculative interpretations occasionally emerge. Some writers have proposed that the elevated cemetery symbolized a sacred threshold between the human world and the heavens, with its temple-like tombs representing stages of a spiritual journey rather than simple memorials. Others suggest that the dramatic position overlooking the Gulf carried astronomical significance extending beyond currently recognized alignments. A few even imagine that certain structures encoded ceremonial knowledge transmitted through architectural symbolism instead of written language. These ideas remain unconfirmed by archaeological evidence. Nevertheless, they reflect the extraordinary impression created by a settlement where architecture, landscape, and memory appear inseparably connected. Local traditions have preserved their own quiet sense of mystery surrounding the site. Guides occasionally describe mornings when thick coastal fog surrounds the terraces, leaving only the upper portions of the ancient walls visible above shifting clouds. During such moments, the cemetery seems suspended between earth and sky, its stone monuments emerging gradually as sunlight disperses the mist. Visitors often describe these experiences as deeply moving, not because they suggest anything supernatural, but because they reveal how profoundly the natural environment continues shaping perception of the ancient city. Modern archaeological work has clarified many aspects of Quiahuiztlán, while simultaneously revealing how much remains unknown. Portions of the surrounding settlement remain only partially excavated, and subtle architectural relationships continue emerging through detailed mapping and conservation. Every restored terrace, every documented tomb, and every recovered artifact contributes another fragment to an incomplete historical narrative. Standing among the silent stone tombs with the Gulf stretching endlessly toward the horizon, it becomes difficult to separate history from reflection. The builders of Quiahuiztlán created more than a ceremonial center. They shaped a landscape where memory, architecture, and nature became permanently intertwined. Whether future discoveries will fully explain the symbolism of its remarkable cemetery, the intentions behind its carefully planned terraces, or the deeper beliefs that inspired its builders remains uncertain. For now, the cliffs continue watching over the sea just as they have for centuries, quietly preserving secrets that may still lie hidden beneath the stones, waiting for another chapter of their story to be uncovered. As the windswept cliffs of Quiahuiztlán gradually disappear behind us, our journey turns once more toward the rugged landscapes of northern Mexico. The humid coastline gives way to deep canyons, pine-covered mountains, and narrow valleys carved by rivers over countless centuries. Hidden high within these remote cliffs, where reaching the site still demands patience and determination, stands a settlement that appears almost suspended between earth and sky. Known as Cuarenta Casas, it remains one of northern Mexico's most captivating archaeological mysteries. Tucked into the steep walls of the Huapoca Canyon in the modern state of Chihuahua, Cuarenta Casas occupies a series of natural rock shelters overlooking a dramatic gorge. The first glimpse of the settlement is unforgettable. Adobe structures seem to emerge directly from the cliffs, their weathered walls blending with the surrounding stone so completely that they remain almost invisible until viewed from just the right angle. Far below, streams wind through dense vegetation, while towering pine forests cover the surrounding mountains. The isolation of the landscape creates an immediate impression that this was a place chosen with extraordinary care. Despite its name, which translates as 40 houses, the site never actually contained 40 buildings. Early visitors applied the name after seeing numerous rooms scattered throughout the cliffside shelters, but archaeological research has revealed that only a portion of those structures survive today. The name remained, becoming part of the site's enduring identity even as its true history gradually emerged through excavation and careful study. The settlement is generally associated with the Paquimé, or Casas Grandes, cultural tradition that flourished across northwestern Mexico between approximately AD 1200 and 1450. This remarkable civilization developed extensive trade networks linking northern Mexico with communities throughout the American Southwest and farther into Mesoamerica. Exotic shells, turquoise, copper objects, ceramics, and brilliantly colored macaws traveled through these roads, demonstrating an impressive level of cultural exchange across vast distances. Cuarenta Casas appears to have occupied an important position within that larger network. Rather than functioning as an isolated mountain refuge, many archaeologists believe the settlement served as a strategic outpost supporting trade, communication, and regional administration. Its elevated position offered commanding views of the surrounding canyon, making it possible to observe approaching travelers while maintaining natural protection from potential threats. Yet, practical considerations alone may not explain its remarkable location. Constructing permanent homes within steep cliff shelters demanded enormous effort. Adobe walls had to be carefully erected inside confined spaces, timber carried into difficult terrain, and essential supplies transported along narrow mountain paths. Every aspect of daily life required careful planning. Why choose such a demanding environment? One answer may lie in security. The 13th and 14th centuries witnessed periods of regional instability throughout parts of northern Mexico. Communities may have sought naturally defensible locations capable of protecting valuable goods, food supplies, and vulnerable populations. The cliffs surrounding Cuarenta Casas certainly offered considerable defensive advantages, but security tells only part of the story. Excavations have uncovered evidence suggesting that the settlement supported more than ordinary domestic life. Researchers discovered carefully constructed storage rooms, hearths, ceremonial objects, pottery, woven materials, and one particularly remarkable architectural feature known as the House of the Serpent. This structure immediately attracted scholarly attention because of its unusual doorway, decorated with a design resembling the head of a serpent. The serpent occupied profound symbolic importance throughout many ancient cultures of Mexico, often representing renewal, knowledge, fertility, water, or the movement between different realms of existence. Whether the carved design identified the status of the building, marked a ceremonial function, or expressed religious beliefs remains uncertain. Its presence suggests that symbolism played an important role within the settlement. Nearby, archaeologists also identified storage facilities carefully engineered to preserve maize and other agricultural products. Similar to the great granary found at Cueva de la Olla, these spaces reveal sophisticated understanding of ventilation, temperature, and long-term food preservation. Such knowledge would have been essential within a region where environmental conditions could change dramatically between seasons. One of the most intriguing discoveries involved the remains of scarlet macaws. Leaving the secluded cliff dwellings of Cuarenta Casas behind, our journey now leads south into the fertile highlands of central Mexico. The narrow canyons gradually give way to wide valleys framed by towering volcanoes, where ancient communities flourished in the shadow of snow-capped peaks. Here, amid open fields and gentle hills, stands a ceremonial center that remained hidden beneath the landscape for centuries. Although its monuments are less famous than those of many neighboring cultures, the mysteries preserved within Xochitécatl continue to challenge archaeologists and reshape our understanding of the ancient world. Situated in the modern state of Tlaxcala, Xochitécatl occupies a commanding hill overlooking the broad Puebla-Tlaxcala Valley. In the distance rise the majestic volcanoes Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl, their imposing silhouettes dominating the horizon much as they did thousands of years ago. Morning sunlight slowly illuminates the grassy platforms, while shifting clouds cast moving shadows across ancient pyramids, whose outlines appear almost inseparable from the surrounding landscape. The setting possesses a quiet grandeur, inviting reflection rather than spectacle. Unlike many ceremonial cities that developed into densely populated urban centers, Xochitécatl appears to have served a different purpose. Archaeological evidence suggests it functioned primarily as a ceremonial complex, drawing people from nearby settlements for rituals, seasonal gatherings, and public observances rather than supporting a permanently large population. This distinction immediately raises intriguing questions. Why construct monumental architecture in a place where relatively few people seem to have lived? What events justified the enormous investment of labor required to shape this hill into a sacred landscape? The origins of Xochitécatl extend far into antiquity. Archaeological investigations indicate that the site flourished between approximately 800 BC and AD 200, making it one of the oldest major ceremonial centers in central Mexico. During this period, neighboring communities developed increasingly complex social structures, while long-distance exchange connected regions separated by mountains, valleys, and forests. At Xochitécatl, builders transformed the summit into an organized ceremonial precinct composed of plazas, platforms, and pyramidal structures carefully arranged to overlook the surrounding valley. Among these monuments, one immediately commands attention. Known today as the Pyramid of Flowers, the structure rises with broad terraces that blend gracefully into the hillside. Its modern name reflects discoveries made during excavation rather than any surviving ancient inscription. Archaeologists uncovered thousands of offerings associated with fertility, renewal, and ceremonial practice, suggesting that the pyramid occupied a central role within the spiritual life of the community. Among the most remarkable discoveries were numerous clay figurines. Many portray women. Some carry children. Others display elaborate hairstyles, jewelry, or symbolic adornments. Their extraordinary number has transformed Xochitécatl into one of the most significant archaeological sites for studying gender, ritual, and religious life in ancient central Mexico. Mainstream archaeological interpretation suggests these figurines formed part of ceremonies associated with fertility, agricultural abundance, childbirth, and the cyclical renewal of life. Such themes were deeply important within farming societies dependent upon seasonal rainfall and successful harvests. Offerings may have accompanied festivals marking planting, harvest, or other moments of profound communal significance. Yet, the sheer quantity of female imagery has encouraged broader discussion. Some researchers propose that women occupied especially prominent ceremonial roles within the community gathered at Xochitécatl. Others suggest the site honored powerful female deities whose identities remain only partially understood. Although direct evidence remains limited, the archaeological record clearly indicates that feminine symbolism played an unusually important role here. Nearby stands another remarkable structure known as the Spiral Building. Unlike the geometric pyramids surrounding it, this circular platform immediately captures attention through its distinctive form. Circular architecture remains comparatively uncommon within many regions of ancient Mexico, making its presence especially intriguing. Why choose a circular design when nearly every neighboring monument follows rectangular principles? One widely accepted explanation links the building to ceremonies involving wind, movement, or celestial observation. Circular forms frequently symbolize continuity, cycles, and natural rhythms throughout many cultures. The building may therefore have reflected concepts associated with seasonal change, cosmic order, or recurring patterns within the natural world. Its exact purpose, however, remains uncertain. Researchers have also identified possible astronomical relationships within the layout of Xochitécatl. Several structures appear aligned with significant solar events, including the changing positions of sunrise during particular seasons. Such alignments would have provided valuable information for agricultural planning while reinforcing ceremonial calendars observed by surrounding communities. Ancient societies throughout central Mexico demonstrated remarkable skill in tracking celestial cycles, integrating astronomical observation into architecture with extraordinary precision. The surrounding volcanoes may have contributed to this carefully designed landscape. Towering above the valley, Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl dominate nearly every view from the ceremonial complex. Mountains frequently held profound spiritual importance within ancient belief systems, representing sources of water, fertility, and divine power. Their visible presence may have transformed the entire valley into part of a much larger sacred landscape, extending far beyond the monuments themselves. Excavations have uncovered additional evidence supporting the ceremonial importance of the site. Offerings buried beneath platforms include pottery, obsidian blades, stone tools, shells carried from distant coastlines, pigments, and carefully arranged ritual deposits. Each discovery reflects repeated acts of dedication spanning generations rather than isolated ceremonial events. Then, quite unexpectedly, the site experienced a dramatic transformation. Around AD 200, major ceremonial activity appears to have declined significantly. Construction slowed. Some structures ceased to receive new offerings. The reasons remain uncertain. Environmental change has been proposed as one possible explanation. Shifting climate patterns or volcanic activity may have altered agricultural conditions within the surrounding valley. Others suggest that political changes redirected ceremonial authority toward neighboring centers such as Cacaxtla, eventually reducing Xochitécatl's regional importance. Yet, none of these explanations fully resolves the mystery. Why would such an important ceremonial center gradually lose its prominence while neighboring settlements continued developing? Did changing religious beliefs alter patterns of pilgrimage? Did social upheaval reshape regional alliances? Or were there reasons that left little trace within the archaeological record? Outside mainstream archaeology, Xochitécatl has inspired numerous speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers suggest the extraordinary concentration of female figurines reflects an ancient tradition centered upon priestesses who guided ceremonial life through seasonal rituals. Others propose that the Pyramid of Flowers functioned as a place where astronomical observations merged with fertility ceremonies, marking the relationship between the heavens and agricultural renewal. A few have even argued that the arrangement of monuments encoded symbolic knowledge expressed through architecture rather than writing. These ideas remain outside established archaeological consensus. Nevertheless, they underscore the remarkable complexity of a site whose surviving evidence continues resisting simple interpretation. Modern visitors often remark upon the unusual atmosphere surrounding Xochitécatl. Unlike crowded archaeological centers, the hill frequently remains quiet, allowing wind to move freely across the ancient terraces. Birds circle overhead, while distant volcanoes dominate the horizon. The landscape encourages contemplation, making it easy to imagine generations gathering here to observe the changing seasons, celebrate harvests, or participate in ceremonies whose details have gradually disappeared from memory. Archaeological research continues revealing new information through excavation, environmental analysis, and increasingly sophisticated survey techniques. Previously unknown features have emerged beneath accumulated soil, suggesting that significant portions of the ceremonial complex remain incompletely understood. Every discovery adds another fragment to a narrative still unfolding after more than 2,000 years. Standing upon the summit as evening light settles across the valley, Xochitécatl offers no simple answers. Its monuments preserve echoes of ceremonies, beliefs, and traditions that shape the lives of countless people. Yet, much of their deeper meaning remains just beyond reach. Whether future excavations uncover forgotten rituals, clarify the remarkable role of female symbolism, or reveal entirely new dimensions of this ancient ceremonial center, the hill continues to guard its oldest memories in silence, inviting each new generation to wonder what truths may still lie hidden beneath its quiet stone terraces. As the quiet ceremonial terraces of Xochitécatl fade into the distance, our journey makes one final turn toward the vast northern frontier of ancient Mexico. The fertile central valleys slowly give way to broad grasslands, distant mountain ranges, and open skies stretching far beyond the horizon. In this seemingly unforgiving landscape stands one of the most extraordinary archaeological sites ever discovered in North America. Its architecture, engineering, and cultural connections continue to challenge long-held assumptions about the civilizations that once flourished here. This is Paquimé, a city whose silence has only deepened its mystery. Located in the modern state of Chihuahua, near the valley of the Casas Grandes River, Paquimé occupies an environment where survival required remarkable ingenuity. The surrounding landscape appears dry for much of the year, yet hidden springs and seasonal waterways supported agriculture, trade, and permanent settlement. From a distance, the ruins resemble the remains of an immense earthen fortress. As visitors draw closer, the complexity of the city slowly reveals itself through hundreds of interconnected rooms, ceremonial plazas, carefully planned streets, and sophisticated water systems unlike anything else in the region. Unlike isolated cliff dwellings such as Cuarenta Casas, Paquimé developed into a thriving urban center. At its height, between approximately AD 1200 and 1450, the city may have supported several thousand inhabitants. Massive, adobe apartment-like buildings rose multiple stories above the surrounding plain, connected through narrow passageways and interior courtyards. Wooden beams reinforced walls constructed from compacted earth, while carefully engineered drainage systems carried water throughout the settlement with remarkable efficiency. Even today, the scale of the city feels unexpected. How did such a sophisticated center emerge in a region often described as environmentally challenging? What forces transformed this valley into one of the most influential trading centers of its time? Archaeologists have spent decades attempting to answer those questions. Excavations reveal a society possessing extraordinary organizational ability. Paquimé served as the heart of an extensive commercial network, linking northern Mexico with communities throughout the American Southwest and central Mexico. Turquoise traveled south. Copper bells, shell ornaments, pottery, obsidian, and brilliantly colored macaws moved across hundreds of kilometers through carefully maintained exchange routes. Rather than existing on the edge of ancient civilization, Paquimé occupied a strategic crossroads connecting diverse cultures over immense distances. The city's architecture reflects equally impressive planning. Residential compounds appear organized into neighborhoods surrounding open plazas. Specialized workshops produced ceramics celebrated for their intricate geometric designs. Storage facilities preserved agricultural products through changing seasons, while sophisticated canals distributed precious water with remarkable precision. Every feature suggests long-term planning supported by stable leadership and considerable technical knowledge. Among the most fascinating discoveries are the remains of large aviaries built specifically for breeding scarlet macaws. These vibrant tropical birds naturally inhabit forests located hundreds of kilometers to the south. Their successful breeding within Paquimé demonstrates not only extensive trade connections, but also advanced understanding of animal care under conditions far removed from the bird's natural habitat. Macaw feathers held immense ceremonial value throughout ancient Mexico, symbolizing solar power, prestige, and sacred authority. The presence of these aviaries immediately raises intriguing possibilities. Were the birds maintained primarily for trade? Did they participate in elaborate religious ceremonies? Or did they occupy a deeper symbolic role within the city's spiritual traditions? Archaeological evidence confirms their importance, but leaves many details unresolved. Nearby, researchers uncovered ceremonial mounds, ball courts, and ritual structures whose designs display influences from both northern and central Mesoamerican traditions. This remarkable blending of architectural styles has encouraged continuing debate regarding Paquimé's cultural identity. Some scholars argue that the city developed largely through local innovation, gradually expanding into a regional center as trade increased. Others emphasize strong connections with societies farther south, suggesting that ideas, technologies, and ceremonial traditions spread through generations of sustained interaction rather than conquest. The archaeological record supports elements of both perspectives. Paquimé appears neither entirely isolated nor simply an extension of another civilization. Instead, it represents something distinctive, shaped through centuries of adaptation, exchange, and creativity. One of the city's greatest engineering achievements involves its water management system. Channels directed water through residential districts, while reservoirs stored supplies during dry periods. Such infrastructure required careful surveying, coordinated labor, and detailed environmental knowledge. In a landscape where rainfall remained unpredictable, controlling water meant securing the city's future. Yet water may have represented more than practical necessity. Throughout ancient Mexico, springs, rivers, and flowing water frequently carried ceremonial significance associated with fertility, renewal, and communication between different realms of existence. Several architectural features within Paquimé suggest that water may have participated in ritual life as well as daily survival, although its precise ceremonial role remains uncertain. Another enduring mystery concerns the city's sudden decline. Around the middle of the 15th century, Paquimé experienced dramatic disruption. Construction ceased. Portions of the settlement were damaged by fire. Population levels declined rapidly before the city was eventually abandoned altogether. Why? Environmental stress has received considerable scholarly attention. Extended droughts may have reduced agricultural productivity while increasing competition for limited resources. Political instability affecting regional trade networks may also have weakened the city's economic foundation. Conflict has likewise been proposed, supported in part by evidence of burning within certain structures. Yet no single explanation fully accounts for the archaeological evidence. Instead, many researchers believe several factors likely combined over time, gradually undermining a society that had flourished for centuries. Outside mainstream archaeology, Paquimé has inspired a wide range of speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers suggest the city functioned as a ceremonial meeting place where cultures from distant regions exchanged religious knowledge alongside valuable goods. Others have proposed that its carefully planned layout reflects astronomical principles encoded within urban design. Certain architectural alignments appear consistent with significant solar events, although scholars continue debating whether these relationships were intentional or coincidental. A few more imaginative theories have even suggested that Paquimé preserved fragments of an older tradition whose origins remain hidden somewhere within the deserts and mountains of northern Mexico. No archaeological evidence currently supports such claims, yet they demonstrate the remarkable fascination inspired by a city whose sophistication surprised early investigators. The landscape itself adds another dimension to the mystery. As daylight fades across the valley, the adobe walls gradually assume the same warm colors as the surrounding earth. Wind moves quietly through empty doorways that once echoed with conversation, ritual, and daily life. The silence feels unusually complete, interrupted only by distant birds and the occasional rustle of desert vegetation. Standing within the ruins, it becomes surprisingly easy to imagine the city still alive, its plazas filled with traders arriving from distant lands and its ceremonial spaces illuminated by evening fires. Modern archaeological research continues transforming understanding of Paquimé. New excavation methods, environmental studies, and advanced mapping technologies have revealed previously unknown neighborhoods, construction phases, and engineering features hidden beneath accumulated soil. Every discovery strengthens appreciation for the city's complexity while introducing fresh questions that demand further investigation. Perhaps that is Paquimé's greatest legacy. It reminds us that remarkable civilizations can flourish in places once assumed incapable of supporting them. Its architecture demonstrates extraordinary ingenuity. Its trade networks reveal connections spanning immense distances. Its artistic traditions reflect both innovation and cultural exchange. Yet despite decades of careful research, fundamental questions remain unanswered. Why did such an advanced society emerge here? What beliefs united the people who built this remarkable city? And what knowledge may still rest beneath the desert floor, waiting for future archaeologists to uncover another chapter in the enduring mystery of Paquimé? As the silent avenues of Paquimé gradually disappear into the northern horizon, our journey turns once more toward the lush lowlands of eastern Mexico. The dry desert winds give way to humid forests, fertile plains, and rivers that have carried people, ideas, and traditions for countless generations. Rising unexpectedly from this green landscape stands a solitary pyramid, surrounded not by an immense ancient city, but by a quiet modern town. Its presence feels almost timeless, as though it has patiently watched every passing century while keeping its oldest memories carefully concealed. This is Castillo de Teayo, a place where cultures converged, histories overlapped, and many questions remain unanswered. Located in the modern state of Veracruz, Castillo de Teayo occupies a strategic position between the Gulf Coast and the inland highlands. The surrounding countryside appears peaceful, with fields stretching toward the horizon and dense vegetation softening the outlines of distant hills. Yet at the center of the town rises a steep stone pyramid that immediately captures attention. Its broad terraces climb toward the sky with quiet authority, reminding visitors that long before modern streets surrounded it, this was one of the most significant ceremonial landmarks in the region. Unlike many archaeological sites that stand isolated from contemporary life, Castillo de Teayo exists within a living community. Everyday life unfolds around the ancient monument, creating an unusual contrast between past and present. Children play nearby, church bells echo across the town, and markets continue much as they have for generations, while the pyramid remains motionless, preserving traces of civilizations whose names have gradually faded from memory. Archaeologists believe the visible pyramid was constructed during the late post-classic period, although the site itself almost certainly rests upon much older foundations. Excavations indicate that Castillo de Teayo became an important ceremonial center where different cultural traditions intersected over several centuries. The region occupied a natural crossroads connecting the Huastec people to the north with powerful societies farther south, allowing artistic styles, religious beliefs, and commercial networks to blend in ways that remain only partly understood. This layered history immediately introduces one of the site's greatest mysteries. Who truly built Castillo de Teayo? The archaeological evidence refuses to provide a simple answer. Some architectural features resemble those associated with the Huastec civilization, renowned for its distinctive sculpture and artistic traditions. Other elements display influences commonly linked with the Mexico world during the centuries preceding European arrival. Rather than belonging entirely to one cultural identity, the monument appears to preserve the legacy of several communities whose histories gradually became intertwined. The pyramid itself rises in carefully constructed stages, each terrace reflecting remarkable engineering despite the region's humid climate. Stone retaining walls support earthen fill, while stairways once guided ceremonial processions toward temples that no longer survive. Time, weather, and later construction have altered portions of the monument, yet its commanding presence continues to dominate the surrounding landscape. Scattered throughout the site, archaeologists have uncovered one of Castillo de Teayo's most extraordinary collections of carved stone sculptures. Many portray human figures wearing elaborate ceremonial attire. Others depict deities, warriors, or symbolic beings combining human and supernatural characteristics. Several display remarkable artistic detail, from carefully carved ornaments to expressive facial features that appear almost lifelike despite centuries of exposure. These sculptures have become central to understanding the site's significance. Mainstream archaeology generally interprets them as representations of religious beliefs, political authority, and ceremonial identity. Their artistic styles suggest interaction between neighboring cultures rather than complete isolation, reflecting a region where ideas traveled alongside merchants, pilgrims, and diplomats. Yet the diversity of the sculptures has encouraged continued scholarly debate. Why do certain figures resemble traditions associated with the Huastec region, while others display characteristics linked to central Mexico? Did different communities successively occupy the site? Or did Castillo de Teayo function as a shared ceremonial center where multiple cultural identities coexisted over generations? Excavations continue refining these questions without providing definitive conclusions. One particularly fascinating aspect of the monument involves its relationship with the surrounding landscape. Although not positioned upon a towering mountain, the pyramid nevertheless rises prominently above the relatively flat countryside, making it visible from considerable distances. Such visibility would have reinforced its ceremonial importance while establishing it as both a spiritual landmark and a symbol of regional authority. Researchers have also examined the orientation of the pyramid. Certain architectural alignments appear broadly consistent with solar movements observed during significant points of the annual cycle. Like many ceremonial centers throughout ancient Mexico, Castillo de Teayo may have incorporated astronomical observations into ritual practice, allowing priests to coordinate agricultural festivals and ceremonial calendars with the changing seasons. Whether these alignments carried additional symbolic meaning remains uncertain. Some archaeologists view them primarily as practical calendrical tools. Others believe they reflected broader cosmological concepts connecting earthly ceremonies with the orderly movement of the heavens. The archaeological evidence allows for careful discussion, but not absolute certainty. Beneath the visible pyramid, another mystery quietly persists. Many researchers suspect that earlier construction phases remain buried within the monument itself. Throughout ancient Mesoamerica, it was common for new rulers to enlarge existing temples rather than demolish them completely. Successive generations often built directly over older structures, preserving earlier monuments within expanding layers of stone and earth. If the same process occurred here, hidden chambers or earlier pyramids may still exist deep inside the monument. Modern archaeological techniques have identified indications suggesting multiple construction stages, but much of the pyramid remains unexplored. Every generation of excavation reveals additional details while hinting that the oldest chapters of the site's history remain sealed beneath later architecture. Outside mainstream archaeology, Castillo de Teayo has inspired several speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers suggest that its artistic diversity reflects the survival of ceremonial traditions inherited from much older civilizations, whose identities have yet to be fully reconstructed. Others propose that the pyramid functioned as a meeting place where distant communities gathered during important religious festivals, exchanging not only goods, but also sacred knowledge and ritual practices. A few writers have gone further, suggesting that hidden chambers may preserve ceremonial objects deliberately concealed during times of political upheaval. To date, no archaeological evidence has confirmed such claims. Even so, the possibility of undiscovered structures beneath the pyramid continues to encourage scientific investigation. The atmosphere surrounding Castillo de Teayo contributes quietly to its enduring fascination. Unlike remote ruins hidden within forests or deserts, this monument remains woven into the rhythms of everyday life. As evening approaches, long shadows stretch across the ancient terraces, while the sounds of the modern town gradually soften. The contrast becomes striking. The pyramid stands unchanged while generations pass around it, preserving an extraordinary continuity between distant antiquity and the present. Local traditions occasionally describe the monument as a place where the past never feels entirely absent. Residents speak respectfully of its enduring presence, and visitors often remark upon an unexpected sense of stillness when climbing its weathered steps. Such impressions belong to personal experience rather than archaeology, yet they reflect the emotional power ancient places continue to hold over those who encounter them. Despite decades of research, Castillo de Teayo remains far from fully understood. Its sculptures continue raising questions about cultural interaction. Its architecture suggests multiple phases of construction. Its buried foundations may still conceal evidence capable of reshaping regional history. Every new excavation deepens appreciation for the site's complexity, while reminding researchers that many of its oldest secrets remain inaccessible. Standing beside the ancient pyramid as twilight settles over the Veracruz plains, it becomes difficult to separate certainty from possibility. The monument has witnessed shifting civilizations, changing languages, and centuries of transformation, yet it continues to reveal its story only in fragments. Whether future discoveries uncover hidden chambers, earlier temples, or forgotten traditions preserved beneath its stone terraces, Castillo de Teayo remains a place where the known and the unknown exist side by side, inviting us to wonder how many chapters of its remarkable history are still waiting silently beneath the surface. As the weathered pyramid of Castillo de Teayo slowly fades behind us, our journey continues into one of Mexico's least explored archaeological landscapes. The humid coastal plains gradually give way to rugged hills, dense tropical forests, and winding rivers that disappear beneath thick canopies of green. Hidden within this secluded environment lies a ceremonial center that rarely appears in history books, yet quietly preserves the legacy of a civilization that still puzzles archaeologists. This is Malpasito, a forgotten city whose silent stone monuments continue to raise questions that have yet to find satisfying answers. Nestled in the modern state of Tabasco near the border with Chiapas, Malpasito occupies a strategic position among low mountain ridges overlooking fertile valleys and ancient travel routes. The surrounding forest is alive with constant sound. Birds call from the treetops, insects fill the humid air with an endless chorus, and streams wind through the vegetation before disappearing among limestone outcrops. Unlike many archaeological sites standing in open landscapes, Malpasito often reveals itself only gradually. Thick vegetation conceals its architecture until broad stone platforms and carefully constructed terraces suddenly emerge from the greenery. The first impression is one of remarkable balance. Rather than dominating the landscape, the builders appear to have worked alongside it. Hillsides were carefully leveled into terraces. Massive retaining walls stabilized natural slopes. Broad stairways linked elevated plazas with lower ceremonial spaces, allowing the entire settlement to follow the contours of the surrounding terrain instead of resisting them. Even after centuries of abandonment, the city still appears deeply connected to the hills upon which it was built. Archaeologists generally associate Malpasito with the Zoque civilization, one of the oldest and least understood cultural traditions in southern Mexico. Although the Zoque are often overshadowed by neighboring civilizations such as the Maya and the Olmec, archaeological evidence demonstrates that they developed sophisticated communities, extensive trade networks, and distinctive architectural traditions extending across large portions of the region. Malpasito flourished primarily during the late Classic period, roughly between AD 700 and 900. By this time, the city had become an important ceremonial and administrative center, positioned along routes connecting the Gulf Coast with the highlands of Chiapas and beyond. Traders carrying obsidian, jade, pottery, shells, cacao, and other valuable goods likely passed through these valleys for generations, transforming Malpasito into an important crossroads where ideas traveled alongside commerce. Its location was no accident. The surrounding hills offered natural protection, while nearby rivers provided reliable access to water and transportation. Fertile soils supported agriculture, and elevated viewpoints allowed inhabitants to monitor movement across the landscape. Every aspect of the settlement suggests careful planning, informed by a detailed understanding of both geography and environmental conditions. Excavations have uncovered plazas, pyramidal platforms, elite residences, ceremonial stairways, and an unusually well-preserved ball court. Pottery fragments, stone tools, carved monuments, and ritual offerings provide valuable insights into daily life, although much of the site remains only partially excavated. One of Malpasito's most distinctive architectural features is its extraordinary use of terraces. Instead of constructing monumental pyramids upon flat plains, the builders transformed entire hillsides into carefully organized ceremonial complexes. Large retaining walls created level platforms where temples, administrative buildings, and gathering spaces overlooked the surrounding valleys. This approach required exceptional engineering skill and considerable labor, demonstrating that the community possessed both organizational ability and long-term planning. Researchers have also noted the presence of numerous carved stone monuments scattered throughout the site. Although many have suffered erosion over the centuries, several still preserve traces of human figures, symbolic designs, and geometric motifs. Unlike the elaborate inscriptions found at certain Maya cities, these carvings reveal relatively little written information, making interpretation significantly more challenging. Why did the builders leave behind so few readable records? Did they rely primarily upon traditions passed from one generation to another through spoken language rather than written texts? Or have fragile materials carrying their history simply disappeared over time? These questions remain central to understanding not only Malpasito, but the Zoque civilization itself. The ceremonial ball court adds another layer to the mystery. Throughout ancient Mesoamerica, the ritual ball game carried meanings extending far beyond athletic competition. It represented political negotiation, religious symbolism, and cosmological concepts involving balance, renewal, and the relationship between opposing forces. The construction of such a court at Malpasito indicates that these ceremonies formed an important part of community life. Yet the precise role of the ball game within Zoque society remains only partly understood. Without extensive written records, archaeologists must rely upon architecture, artifacts, and comparisons with neighboring cultures while remaining cautious not to assume identical beliefs existed everywhere. Another fascinating aspect of Malpasito involves its relationship with neighboring civilizations. The city's architecture displays certain characteristics reminiscent of both Maya and Central Mexican traditions, while retaining features unique to the Zoque cultural sphere. Pottery styles, construction techniques, and artistic motifs all suggest that Malpasito participated in a vibrant network of cultural interaction rather than existing in complete isolation. This raises an important possibility. Perhaps Malpasito served not simply as a regional capital, but as a place where different communities met, exchanged knowledge, and developed shared traditions without losing their own cultural identity. Modern archaeology increasingly recognizes such interaction as a defining characteristic of ancient Mexico. Civilizations were rarely isolated. Ideas moved alongside merchants. Architectural innovations spread through generations of contact. Religious symbols evolved as neighboring societies encountered one another across landscapes connected by trade and migration. Malpasito appears to fit comfortably within this broader pattern while maintaining its own distinctive character. Researchers have also explored possible astronomical alignments within the site's layout. Several principal stairways and ceremonial structures appear oriented toward significant points along the horizon where the sun rises or sets during important moments of the annual cycle. Such alignments would have assisted agricultural planning while reinforcing ceremonial calendars tied to seasonal change. Whether these orientations carried additional symbolic meaning remains uncertain. Some archaeologists view them primarily as practical observations of recurring natural events. Others suggest they formed part of a more elaborate cosmological system linking architecture with celestial movement. Both interpretations remain plausible given the available evidence. Outside mainstream archaeology, Malpasito has inspired several thoughtful but unverified theories. Some independent researchers have proposed that the city's hilltop terraces represented symbolic models of sacred mountains believed to connect the human world with divine realms. Others suggest that hidden chambers may still exist beneath the larger platforms, containing ritual offerings or ceremonial objects left undisturbed since antiquity. A few have speculated that the apparent scarcity of inscriptions reflects the deliberate use of perishable materials such as painted bark manuscripts, wooden carvings, or woven ceremonial textiles that vanished long ago in the humid tropical climate. While none of these ideas has been confirmed, they remind us how easily entire chapters of history can disappear when fragile materials fail to survive. The forest itself contributes powerfully to the atmosphere surrounding Malpasito. Unlike archaeological sites exposed beneath open skies, this city remains partially embraced by vegetation. Sunlight filters through dense tree canopies, creating constantly shifting patterns across ancient stone walls. Moisture nourishes mosses and climbing plants that slowly reclaim abandoned architecture, softening sharp edges while preserving an impression that nature never truly surrendered this place. Visitors frequently describe an unusual sense of quiet despite the surrounding sounds of the forest. The city feels hidden rather than abandoned. Its terraces seem less like ruins than carefully protected spaces waiting patiently beneath layers of time. Modern archaeological investigations continue revealing new information through advanced mapping technologies, environmental analysis, and careful excavation. Large portions of the surrounding hills remain unexplored, leaving open the possibility that additional ceremonial structures, residential districts, or carved monuments still lie concealed beneath centuries of accumulated soil and vegetation. Leaving the forested terraces of Malpasito behind, our journey follows the winding rivers that flow across the tropical lowlands of southeastern Mexico. Dense vegetation stretches toward every horizon, interrupted only by ancient earthen mounds and weathered stone monuments that quietly emerge from the jungle. In this landscape, where waterways once served as the lifelines of entire civilizations, stands an archaeological site whose importance far exceeds its modern recognition. Hidden beneath centuries of tropical growth, Moral-Reforma preserves the echoes of political rivalries, royal ambition, and ceremonies whose deeper meaning continues to challenge historians. Located in the modern state of Tabasco near the banks of the San Pedro Martir River, Moral-Reforma occupies a region shaped by fertile floodplains, winding channels, and dense rainforest. The environment is both generous and demanding. Seasonal rains nourish rich agricultural soils while rivers provide natural highways connecting distant settlements. Yet the same waters can flood unexpectedly, transforming the surrounding landscape within days. Ancient builders clearly understood these rhythms, selecting elevated ground that balanced accessibility with protection from seasonal flooding. Approaching the site today, visitors first encounter broad grassy plazas framed by towering pyramidal structures rising above the surrounding trees. The silence is broken only by birds, insects, and the occasional rustle of wind moving through the forest canopy. Unlike some of the larger Maya cities crowded with monumental architecture, Moral-Reforma conveys an atmosphere of measured elegance. Every building appears carefully positioned within an orderly ceremonial plan, creating a landscape that feels both deliberate and deeply connected to its natural surroundings. Archaeological evidence indicates that Moral-Reforma flourished during the Classic period, reaching its greatest prominence between approximately AD 600 and 900. During these centuries, the city occupied an important position along river trade routes, linking powerful Maya kingdoms across the southern lowlands. Canoes carrying jade, obsidian, cacao, pottery, textiles, shells, and other valuable goods likely passed regularly through these waterways, making Moral-Reforma an influential participant in regional commerce and diplomacy. Its strategic location brought prosperity. It also brought danger. The city's position between rival political powers meant that alliances constantly shifted. Rather than existing independently, Moral-Reforma became deeply involved in the complex network of competing Maya kingdoms whose rulers negotiated, traded, celebrated victories, and occasionally waged war against one another. Remarkably, unlike many archaeological sites where history survives primarily through architecture, Moral-Reforma preserves a significant number of carved monuments bearing hieroglyphic inscriptions. These stelae provide rare glimpses into the lives of ancient rulers. Royal names emerge from carefully carved glyphs. Military victories are commemorated. Political alliances appear and disappear across generations. Ceremonial events unfold in stone with remarkable precision. Yet even these inscriptions leave many mysteries unresolved. Scholars have successfully deciphered portions of the texts, revealing that Moral-Reforma interacted with powerful neighboring cities, including Palenque and Calakmul, at different moments in its history. At times, the city appears closely aligned with one regional power, only to shift allegiance later as political circumstances changed. These changing relationships illustrate the remarkable flexibility required for survival within the competitive political landscape of the classic Maya world. But why did these alliances change so frequently? Were they driven by military pressure, economic necessity, dynastic marriage, or internal struggles that left little visible trace within the archaeological record? The inscriptions offer valuable clues but rarely provide complete explanations. The city's architecture reflects its political significance. Several pyramids dominate the ceremonial core, rising above spacious plazas where public rituals once brought together rulers, priests, merchants, and ordinary citizens. Stairways ascend steep terraces toward temples that likely served as both religious sanctuaries and symbols of royal authority. From their summits, leaders could survey not only the assembled population, but also the surrounding river valleys that sustained the city's prosperity. Researchers have identified evidence suggesting that many of these structures were enlarged repeatedly over generations. Rather than replacing older buildings entirely, new rulers often constructed larger temples directly above earlier ones. This practice preserved the sacred character of important locations, while simultaneously expressing the authority of successive dynasties. Hidden deep within several pyramids, earlier construction phases may still remain untouched, preserving architectural chapters that archaeologists have only begun to explore. One particularly fascinating aspect of Moral-Reforma involves its elaborate carved monuments. The artistic quality of many stele rivals that found at far better-known Maya cities. Intricate depictions of rulers wearing ceremonial regalia appear alongside complex hieroglyphic texts recording significant historical events. Every carved detail reflects extraordinary craftsmanship, as well as the political importance of public memory. Yet many monuments have suffered erosion. Time, humidity, and centuries of exposure have gradually softened inscriptions that may once have preserved far more detailed historical accounts. Entire passages have disappeared, leaving broken narratives that scholars must carefully reconstruct using comparison, context, and linguistic analysis. This incomplete record introduces one of the site's greatest mysteries. How much history has simply been lost? Did additional monuments once stand here only to collapse or disappear through natural processes? Did painted murals, wooden inscriptions, or bark manuscripts preserve stories that could no longer survive the tropical climate? The absence of evidence often proves as intriguing as the discoveries themselves. Astronomical planning may also have played an important role within the city's design. Several principal structures appear broadly aligned with significant solar events, while the arrangement of plazas suggests careful attention to sightlines across the surrounding landscape. Throughout the Maya world, architecture frequently reflected observations of celestial cycles that regulated agriculture, ceremonial calendars, and royal ritual. Whether Moral-Reforma possessed a particularly sophisticated astronomical tradition remains uncertain. Some researchers argue that the observed alignments fit broader regional patterns. Others caution that additional excavation and surveying are necessary before firm conclusions can be reached. The surrounding rivers contribute another dimension to the mystery. Waterways shaped nearly every aspect of life within the ancient city. They provided transportation, supported agriculture, and connected Moral-Reforma with distant political centers. At the same time, rivers frequently carried symbolic importance throughout Maya belief systems, representing movement between different realms of existence, renewal, and the continual passage of time. Ceremonies performed here may therefore have drawn meaning from both practical and spiritual relationships with the surrounding waters. Outside mainstream archaeology, Moral-Reforma has inspired several speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers suggest that the city's repeated political realignments concealed a more complex ceremonial role, allowing it to function as neutral ground where rival kingdoms occasionally conducted diplomatic rituals. Others propose that undiscovered chambers within the pyramids may still contain royal burials or ritual offerings, capable of clarifying the city's dynastic history. A few have even suggested that missing inscriptions once recorded events considered too politically sensitive to preserve after changing alliances reshaped regional power. Such ideas remain unverified. Even so, the site's incomplete historical record naturally encourages thoughtful speculation. Modern archaeological investigations continue expanding knowledge of Moral-Reforma through advanced mapping technologies, excavation, and epigraphic research. Every newly deciphered glyph contributes another fragment to an intricate political narrative extending across centuries. At the same time, extensive areas surrounding the ceremonial core remain largely unexplored beneath dense vegetation, leaving open the possibility that additional monuments and residential districts still await discovery.